Melissa shielded her eyes as the wind roared across her front yard. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Marine One, the official presidential helicopter, was landing right outside her small farmhouse, and standing beneath it were men in black suits waving her toward the landing zone. Just 3 weeks earlier, she was boarding a flight home after her mother's funeral. When she saw a man with severe burns quietly struggling to sit in economy, she offered him her first-class seat without a second thought. He never said thank you. She never expected to see him again. Hey everyone, welcome to Legacy Tales. Let's begin. Melissa had only ever flown first class once. Her mother had saved up airline miles for years. Use them for something that makes you feel like life isn't always this hard, she'd said. But now her mother was gone. And so, sitting at gate C21, with a heart heavy from loss, Melissa was finally using those miles. It felt wrong, luxurious, like she didn't deserve it, until she saw him, boarding last, covered in long sleeves despite the heat, skin on his neck pale and uneven, patchy, like melted wax. One eye slightly shut, lips twisted from old scars. He walked hunched, like the world had folded him in. People stared. No one said a word. Some flinched, some looked away. He shuffled down the aisle toward economy. Melissa stood up before she even had time to think about it. She looked at the flight attendant and quietly said, "I want to switch seats with him." The attendant blinked. "Ma'am, that's first class. I know, it's okay." She walked down the aisle toward the man. "Sir," she said gently, "would you mind taking my seat in the front? I'd be happy to switch." He stared at her. Not with confusion, not even with gratitude, just disbelief. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded once and followed the flight attendant back to seat 1A. Melissa sat in his cramped middle seat in the very last row. No one clapped, no one noticed. She thought it was just a moment, a tiny gesture. Then the flight landed, and life moved on. Until the helicopter came. The ground trembled as the helicopter touched down. Melissa's garden, once filled with overgrown sunflowers and quiet, now swirled with dust and security agents. She clutched her sweater tighter, stepping outside barefoot, confused and blinking. A tall man in a black suit approached, earpiece in one ear, serious expression. "Melissa Harper?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "What's going on?" "Ma'am, he's here to see you." "He." Before she could ask more, the side door of the helicopter opened, and out stepped the man with the burns. But this time, he wasn't hunched, he wasn't hiding. He wore a sleek navy suit, his hair was neatly combed, and behind him walked a woman in uniform, a high-ranking officer, followed by 2 more men in suits carrying a small black case. Melissa stared, unsure what to say. The man walked toward her, stopping a few feet away. His voice, though still slightly raspy, was clear. "My name is Colonel Thomas Weller. 3 weeks ago, I boarded that plane in pain. Not just physically, but from the way people looked at me, like I didn't belong in the world anymore." He paused. "But you looked at me like a person. No pity, no fear. You gave up your seat, not because I asked, but because you noticed." Melissa swallowed hard. "I didn't think it was a big deal. To you, maybe," he said. "But for me, it was everything." The woman in uniform stepped forward now. She opened the black case. Inside was a medal, the Medal of Civilian Honor, signed by the President, stamped with the seal of the United States, only given a handful of times in history. Melissa covered her mouth with her hands. "We tried reaching you by mail," the officer said, "but it turns out you don't check your mailbox often." Melissa laughed through tears. I didn't think anything would ever come." Colonel Weller continued, I asked the president personally if I could deliver it. Because kindness like yours isn't just rare, it rebuilds people." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded napkin. "You left this in the seat back pocket," he said softly. She opened it, her own handwriting, almost forgotten. "Everyone deserves comfort, even if just for one flight." Melissa had written it to remind herself. She never meant for anyone to read it, but he had. And now, that one sentence had changed everything. Melissa stood frozen on her porch, napkin in hand, eyes glazed with disbelief. A helicopter, a colonel, a medal, all for a moment she barely remembered. It didn't feel real, but it was. Colonel Weller took a slow step closer. "After that flight," he said, "I started writing again. I hadn't written a word since the explosion. Lost half my unit, lost my voice for 6 months, and when it came back, I just stopped speaking to the world." He reached into his jacket and handed her a small, hardcover book. "Through the Fire" by T.W. Harper. She blinked. "Harper?" "I used your last name," he said. "Felt like I owed you that much." Melissa opened the book. The dedication on the first page read, "For the stranger in seat 33B. You didn't just give up your comfort. You gave me back my voice." She couldn't stop the tears now, not the polite, single-drop kind, the kind that made your chest shake. It wasn't about medals or helicopters. It was about being seen. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the colonel turned to leave. But before stepping into the helicopter, he looked back. "There's one more thing," he said. "That flight? The ticket you gave up? It wasn't just first class." She furrowed her brows. He smiled. "It was the president's seat. He'd canceled last minute. You sat in the only spot that had access to a letter he'd left in the seat back. You gave it to me without knowing." Melissa's eyes widened. "I had no idea." "Neither did we, until I opened it. It was a letter the president had written to veterans but never published. I read it, and it woke something in me. I sent it back with a message, and now it's policy." She blinked. "What is?" He smiled. "No soldier will ever fly coach again?" Then he paused, pointing to the sky. "And no act of kindness will ever go unseen, not anymore." The helicopter rose. Melissa stood alone again, but this time, she didn't feel small. She looked down at the book in her hands, the medal on her porch, the napkin in her palm. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled without pain, because the world had finally reminded her of something she'd almost forgotten. The smallest moments often leave the loudest echoes.